Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to have back on the podcast Dr. Jaime Seeman, aka Dr. Fit and Fabulous, who's a board-certified OB-GYN and has a passion for fitness, preventative medicine, and empowerment in her personal life and with her patients. She has her own podcast called the Fit and Fabulous Podcast with Dr. Jaime Seeman, and we're going to talk about her new book that came out, and I think you just did the audio for your book, too. Hard to Kill. Drumroll. Master the mindset to maximize your years. It's right here. It's so good. I can't get enough of people talking about women talking about muscles to other women. It's like,
yeah,
I just love it.
We need to start having the conversation more.
Totally. You're going to do more conferences, right? We got to keep the muscle momentum going.
Yes, we are. We have to, because it's use it or lose it. So
you have to. I know. You were last year on episode 148, which was March of 2022. Check her out if you want more of her. That title was episode I Want to Be Hard to Kill, Mind Work with Dr. Jaime Seeman. You've been busy. I've been busy. What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, the book just came out this year. And so, I've been super busy podcasting and talking about the book. And then I just got the Audible done. But part of the book also has an online academy, just like you're doing for your people, which I think is, where I love to spend my energy on people that are really wanting to make massive changes in their life. But yeah, I'm also a full-time OBGYN. So I'm delivering lots of babies and doing surgery. And I've got 3 girls of my own that are at a really busy stage in their life doing so many activities. So they are, of course, pulling us in 20 different directions.
Yeah, I was thinking about, because people often tell me, like they just tell me, they're like, you get so much done. How do you get so much done? Like, I still have full-time urology, podcast, wrote a book, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I think I've pretty much figured it out. And then I look at you and I'm like, no, I don't know how she does it all. So even as somebody who is doing it, I'm like, thank God I have a friend in the business who gets it all.
When you're having fun though, right? It's not like, I think some people would look at my life and be like, oh my God, like she's doing so many things. And I've had people tell me that you have so many balls in the air. Are you sure you're doing okay? But when you're doing things that you love and you're passionate about, and when you take care of yourself the way I do, it's really fun and it's fulfilling. And I have a super supportive family, but I honestly don't do, I don't watch TV. I don't do a lot of things that people do wasting what I would call wasting my time, but it's what everybody's priority is. And I love the things that I have in my life. I've built my life. I want to wake up every day with my life and no one else's. So it's really fun.
Totally. When I started figuring that out, I was like, I'm excited to go to bed, to be done sleeping, to wake up and do the things again. And I was like, can I keep having that?
Yeah. And then as soon as something starts to burn you out, you start to dial it back. I've learned to say no to things that don't bring me energy into my life. And I've really prioritized my girls a lot this year because I want to be a mom and I want to be there for all the things. And you just figure out how to fit it all in. We each get 24 hours to make those choices.
I was in preschool this morning. It was awesome. I love cutting construction paper cutout stuff. I love doing that. Just give me a stack of construction paper. It's so good. It's like meditative for me. I'm like, give me a snowman to cut out. I'm in. It's all about that. Well, I love having you on because this podcast is about sex and sex education, but sex doesn't exist in a bubble. And I think that the more you feel good, and we have good data on the healthier you are, the better your sex life is. And so just in weaving in and out of your book today, I kind of want to, weave it back in and out to sexuality. Luckily, you just came off a sex podcast. So I think this will be super easy for you.
Yeah, it's so, I don't talk about sex in the book. It probably deserves its own book, but there's great books like yours that are already out there. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but I think it's a symbiotic relationship, right? We have to be healthy to have a healthy sexual relationships in our life. And then having those healthy sexual relationships helps our overall health. So it's a two-way street for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you love your life and what I'm hearing from you is you have passion in your life and a non-sexual passion, right? And it's finding that, and what the experts will say, people who are passionate people, they find life curious and interesting and they want to go after something. You take that into the bedroom too of hey, I want to go try to make this better. I want to prioritize sexuality in my life. Just passion in general kind of, weaves in and out of everything.
Yeah, passion in the bedroom. It's just I don't love getting up at 5 a.m. to go work out, but I do really care about my fitness and I care about my health. And I know that when I do those things, it makes me happier overall. It makes me healthier overall. It gives me better energy. And so, when it comes to like our sex lives, and I hear you talk about this all the time, I mean, it may not be a priority to you because you're not getting out of it what you should be. And so why would you want to focus, your time and energy there? But if you're, curious about it and you start to really carve out and create time and make it a priority in your relationship and in your life, and it doesn't always have to be with somebody else. I mean, you can have orgasms by yourself. But when you start to make that a priority, if you're curious about it and start to explore it, you might see that it really does provide a lot of other benefits, outside of that 5, 10, 20, 60, 90, 120 minutes or whatever you want to spend on it.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think of it as like, some people are like, oh, they say running is the best thing to do. So I got to spend all this time running. Of like, if you're choosing fitness that you don't actually like, it's a lot harder than if you're choosing fitness that you do like. Right. And the same was with sex. It's like, if you're having sex just because somebody told you should, or it's sex that's not bringing pleasure to you, it's going to be a lot more of a slog than like, oh, turns out I could like lift weights every day.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Let's talk about the connection between body image and fitness and muscles and how body image plays over into your sex life and your confidence in the bedroom. Can you share your experience with that?
Yeah. So I talk about this in my book. I grew up as an athlete but I was a girl and I liked being feminine, right? I kind of played around with makeup, but I was kind of one of those girls that I didn't really wear a lot of makeup. I didn't wear a lot of jewelry, real feminine type things. I definitely, would probably be described as more as a tomboy. But when I went to college and started lifting really hard and really kind of watched my body morphing into this very physically strong, thing. Genetically, I have large leg muscles. I have these like big quads, like bigger than some of my, male friends. I started to really experience kind of just this body dysmorphia of like, yes, I was a woman and I wanted to be feminine. And I was at a point in my life where I'm looking for a partner. Thankfully I met my husband my freshman year of college and didn't have to shop around very long. But it was for me kind of this point in my life where I was like, oh, I can't be both, right? I either have to be this like strong masculine type athlete, or I have to be the pretty dainty feminine, wear high heels and lipstick. Like you couldn't be both things. And I really struggled in my college years, kind of like embracing that and not being ashamed when I was like in the gym, right? Of like having my hair pulled up and curled, or when I was on the softball field competing. We were one of the first decades where we started to see college softball on TV, right? So I wanted to put some makeup on, like I want to look nice for TV. And I was always kind of like living with like one foot in both of these worlds, and I could never feel comfortable like living on both sides of the fence. And then I went to medical school. And so now I'm never lifting weights again. I could not wait. I was a two-time, you guys can see this trophy back here over my shoulder on video. I was a 2-time lifter of the year at Nebraska. I mean, I was lifting heavy weights. I couldn't wait for the day when I went to medical school and I could stop lifting weights. And I had this like fantasy in my mind that like my quads would shrink and I would get skinny again and I would like wear smaller clothes. And, then I had my daughters, which that's like a whole nother like minefield of body dysmorphia, like watching your body like grow this human life and then looking at your postpartum body and it's never the same and it never will be the same, it was before. And then finally, after my third daughter was born, my kind of hard to kill journey, Dr. Fit and Fabulous journey, like getting back into the gym and like starting to lift weights again. And all along this journey, yes, now I speak of it, under like the health lens, but at the same time, there is nothing more amazing about a woman than somebody who feels confident in their own skin, who feels confident in their body and can really give the world all of themselves. And that's where I'm at now in my life. So I'm definitely speaking, out of experience, going through these different phases of my life. But I said this in the book that muscles and strength are not a masculine or feminine thing. They are a human thing. Women and men, we both have muscles. Our muscles are a metabolic organ. They're designed to move our bodies. We are both, men and women, physically designed to do physically hard things. And so we really have to shift away from this societal perception that women are dainty and feminine, and that men and weights and muscle are masculine. We all, both men and women, have feminine and masculine features and desires, and it's not one or the other. It's this beautiful symphony harmony for all of us. And once you kind of break those chains, I think it's been liberating for me. And one example I gave in the book is in 2020, the most like amazing epiphany for me happened. I went from literally in January of 2020 competing on NBC Titan games, right? The most like raw superpower, like physical thing, to literally 2 months later competing for Mrs. Nebraska, which is like the complete opposite, like 6-inch heels and like 6 dead people's hair extensions attached to my head. And for me, it was like when those two experiences happened like so close to each other, it was like, oh my God, like, yes, like you can do whatever you want, whatever, makes you feel awesome. It was like, I can be both things. And it was finally like this moment in my life where like gave myself permission to do that, and, I was just talking on this other sex podcast about like, as doctors sometimes, right? Like we're not supposed to be sexual creatures. Like we're not supposed to, there was that whole like bikini med thing, like because we're doctors, we're not supposed to be seen in bikinis. Like these are all just societal lenses that just get placed on us. And then we start to view ourselves through them. And none of it is true. None of it is true.
Yeah, none of it's true. And I think for so many people, like they want the like 10-point plan to confidence, and like the simplicity of it is you can just decide now. You can just decide now to like accept you as you are, love you for the body you have, for the amazing things it can do. And this confidence doesn't have to be this long, like drawn out slog with somebody's permission of like, oh, now you can be confident. It's like the confidence comes from within.
Yeah. So here's how I think of it. Confidence comes from action, and repeated, consistent actions are what build confidence in whatever we're doing, right? Any skill that we're trying to learn. And action comes from language. And there is this internal language inside of ourselves that is like our hard drive. And that language comes from experiences in our life, maybe things that have happened to you, right? Like me being mocked for having large quads, or me being made fun of because, I was in a beauty pageant. Like there's all these life experiences that kind of set that language. What people need to understand is that whatever you want in life, whether it's like health or fitness or a better sex life or $1 million or like whatever it is, it all starts with that internal language. It's saying like, I am whatever, right? Like I am strong. I am a runner. Like runners run, writers write. Like for people who deal with obesity, like they are telling themselves like, I am a fat, overweight person and I'm tired. And that is the story that they tell themselves. And I watch patients that lose 100 pounds and gain it back because they never changed that language. Their language was still, I am an overweight menopausal woman and I'm tired. Well, then that comes out in action. You will do actions that perpetuate that language. Yeah, and so 100%. When we talk about confidence, when we talk about like wanting something in our life, it has to start with changing the language. And for a lot of people, it has to change with our identity, right? Like it is creating a whole new identity. I went from being a pre-diabetic, overweight, tired mom doctor that didn't think she had the energy to do any of what I'm doing now. And my new identity was like Dr. Fit and Fabulous. And it was kind of a declaration without any evidence. But once I just started saying it over and over and over, it seems so silly. Like once I just named my Facebook page that language starts to change action. That action starts to build and create confidence in who you really are. And when you start living more truly, more authentically to that language, that's what brings joy and fulfillment and love and enlightenment into your life. That's like why I love living this crazy schedule, because it's me. Like it's just, it's my true authentic self.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I think so many people, they're like, I'm not sexual. And it's like, well, do you have sex? And like, no. And I'm like, well, you're just proving yourself right. It's like, Go, and that's,
Yeah.
the whole thing of like, go explore. It's okay to fail. We're so afraid of failing, but it's like failing. The successful people are the ones who just kept going after they failed, right? Of like,
Yeah.
changing your identity, like you have to build the muscles and figure that out, or figure out how orgasms come easy, or figure out how to talk to your partner. But like, it's all doable. We just don't stop.
Right. Exactly. You don't know until you try it. And it's okay to try things and not like it or to fail or whatever, but that's how we really discover who we are. And I think so many people are very much stuck in what I called like the default mode network. So we actually have an area of our brain called the DMN, the default mode network, and it keeps us in that comfort space, in that comfort bubble. And it's a survival technique for us as mammals, because doing things that are perceived as a threat or a challenge could not be good for our survival, right? If we die, it's like a calculated risk. And so that's why sometimes what we don't understand is that growth always comes with friction. But that's where we see the change. It's like if I took you into the gym, Kelly, and I was like, okay, we're going to start doing bicep curls. Most people's brains at some point are like, ooh, this hurts. Like, I think I only have like 2 more reps. I think I'm going to stop. Like, we all stop right when that little thing in our head is like, ooh, this is uncomfortable. But where the actual like physiologic change happens in that muscle, it's right when it starts hurting. Like, that's where the work starts happening. That's where the change starts happening. And that's just one example for so many things in our life that could bring really great things to us. But we always stop right when that little message in our brain is like, ooh, I think you're done.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about muscle. I think between you and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, like you two are my two big, like, muscle is the organ of longevity. And when she had said like, doctors neglect muscles, I'm like, oh yeah, nobody's taking care of the muscles. And it's like our biggest organ. And it's so important in like insulin sensitivity and taking the glucose out of the bloodstream and all that stuff. Talk how you started like figuring out that muscle was important, the organ of longevity, kind of all of your muscle centric and the way you eat and the way you train. Like, because I think muscles as a idea are very foreign to many women.
Yeah. So sorry if I'm coughing on this podcast because I'm on like day 28 of some stupid virus my kids gave me. So I always viewed muscles as an aesthetic. Like, that's what like the world gave to me growing up. It was like, dudes with muscles. They never really put women out there with a lot of muscles, but it was always an aesthetic thing. Like, just like kind of being strong and, working out is for some people, but not for everybody. But as I went through this transition in my life of like having prediabetes and hypothyroidism and kind of looking back on my own life, like I used to lift a lot of weights and things like that. Well, I'd gotten back in the gym, but I was doing like pure bar, and I was, I'd had 3 kids. So I was doing these bar classes because I thought that's just what my mom body like could tolerate. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I should run. So I signed up for a couple of half marathons, and I was like running for like hours upon hours upon hours. My body wasn't changing the way that I wanted it to change. And so finally in 2018, I was like, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet. Like, I've got to start lifting weights again. But I'd always kind of had that thing in the back of my head that was like, you're going to lift weights and be bulky and be large and be muscular, right? Well, what I've realized over the last 5-6 years is that it takes an incredible amount of effort to actually build lean body mass. Like, women say all the time, like,
insanely hard.
I just want to be toned. Like, no, honey, like, you will be toned when you lift your ass off, but it takes an incredible amount of work to actually build lean body mass. And then when I started to like look at all the insulin resistance like literature, and I was like, okay, this like totally makes sense. All we talk about is how fat people are and body fat percentage and waist circumference and all these things. But what really happens is when you start working on building lean body mass, like the fat starts taking care of itself. So I was like, God, well, we're just not approaching this the right way. And, kind of what we've alluded to is like women are afraid of building muscle. Like, they just are. But when you think about longevity and the things that kill women, right? Breast cancer, heart disease, like 2 very, very common things. How do we protect against those things? Okay, good metabolic health. Okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, insulin sensitivity, normal body fat percentage, having a lot of muscle. is protective against these things. And nobody had ever taught me that in medical school. Nobody's told me the patient's skeletal muscle mass percentage or the amount of lean body mass they had per height like made a difference, but it does. It makes a huge difference. And not just the metabolic diseases like diabetes and things like that, but just being able to physically do the things we want to. We're helping patients live a lot longer, but it really should be thinking about the quality of those years. I mean, look at your grandparents. Look at my own parents. I can use them as an example. They're in their late 60s, early 70s. My dad has some major mobility issues, and he's not able to travel as freely as he wants to. He's not able to get down on the ground with my children. He's one fall on the ice outside away from breaking a hip and spending 5 to 10 years, in and out of rehab and hospitals and things like that. So it's not just about the metabolic health portion, but it's also about, taking care of our bones. Another huge thing for women, osteoporosis, osteopenia. So it's not just even in the metabolic lens, but I think what people don't understand, and even doctors don't understand, is that when we say muscle is a metabolic organ, when you exercise, it actually secretes chemicals. It secretes myokines that help with brain and nerve regeneration. It helps the mitochondria process fatty acids and glucose better. Like it's not an aesthetic thing. It's not just about looking, it's not being able to lift 400-pound deadlift, but doing resistance training and building lean body mass over a woman's lifetime will protect her against things that are going to make her life miserable.
Totally. It helps people sleep better too. And like, as people get older, sleep becomes a major issue. So it's like, the weightlifting being like, as far as being a biohack, right? They're like, researchers would love to come up with a pill that gave you what exercise gives you, because they could market it. But it's like, dude, and you feel so good and you are confident and like all this stuff. It's so good.
The body confidence thing. I mean, most women, they want to be toned, but all they have focused on their whole entire life is dieting and cardio. And dieting and caloric restriction are a great way to lose muscle mass. And cardio is another great way to lose muscle mass. And so what happens is, as they just beat the crap out of their body by dieting and doing more running and more running and more cardio and more dieting, and they're losing this lean body mass, is that it's actually hurting them in the long run. It's making it harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to achieve what they're trying to achieve. And then when they hit perimenopause and menopause, that is like a whole nother minefield. So it's never too late. But for people listening, if you are still in your years of fertility where you have this estrogen is really helpful for resistance training and for building lean body mass. So is testosterone. But if you don't prioritize these things early in your life, it can be incredibly hard as you get older to try to undo a lot of that damage.
Yeah. And calorie restriction also, like if you are too low body fat, your hormones go in the toilet. And we want those hormones. Your book, you had talked about being diagnosed with hypothyroidism and PCOS in your book. This is like, literally, I went to medical school and I did not know you could help hypothyroidism with diet. Can you talk more about what you learned about that?
So after my first daughter was born, I got all the classic symptoms of hypothyroidism. I was constipated. I couldn't lose weight. I was like feeling really cold. So I had my labs checked and I was hypothyroid, and my doctor prescribed me levothyroxine or Synthroid. And so I went on the medication, and I had 2 more pregnancies, and I was, monitoring my thyroid levels. And I was thinking to myself, like, am I going to have to take this medicine like the rest of my life? Like, I am not good at remembering to take medicine. And I will fully admit, you guys, this is a medicine you're supposed to take every day in the morning on an empty stomach, and don't eat for 30 to 60 minutes. Well, I would go days where I would miss my medication. And so I would just take like 6, if I'd missed it for 6 days, I would just like take 6 pills at a time. Like, doctors are horrible patients. But then I was diagnosed with prediabetes, and I start looking into it, and I'm like, there's a huge correlation between insulin resistance and hypothyroidism. Like, insulin resistance really can drag on your thyroid, the chronic dieting, the loss of muscle mass, You're not getting, certain nutrients that are essential for thyroid, not just iodine, but like selenium, B vitamins, magnesium. There's so many other things that are important for our thyroids to function. And so I started kind of fixing my diet, right? I did Whole30, then I was doing paleo, then I kind of settled on kind of this more low carb ketogenic lifestyle, which I still live that way today. But what happened is I got off my thyroid medicine, like my thyroid just started like working again. And I still intermittently check my thyroid, and it's beautiful. And I'm not on medication, but I think in medical school, we were taught like the two causes of hypothyroidism were iodine deficiency or autoimmune destruction, Hashimoto's. And I've checked, I don't have antibodies at all. And so I think that, and I see tons of women on thyroid medication, and we can't always we can't always pinpoint what it is, but I think that we have to start making that correlation. And then what happened was like 2 years ago, one of our ultrasound techs in our office got this new cool little ultrasound probe, and it went to her iPhone so she could like see it in real time. And like any good guinea pig, I was like, yeah, do you want to scan me? I was like, I'm not pregnant. I don't know what organ you want to look at. And she's like, well, let me scan your neck. So she's like scanning my carotid. Here's your carotid. And then she like swings over to my thyroid, and she's like, oh, and like her and I saw it at the same time. There was like this huge cyst. And I was like, I had never had my thyroid scanned. And so it was quite large enough that I should be concerned. So I went and saw a head and neck surgeon, thankfully, like the next day. And they did the ultrasound, and they said, yeah, this is quite large. And there was this area in the middle that was actually a little bit necrotic, which was concerning. And so they said, we want to do a biopsy. So, okay. So that day I had a fine needle aspiration of this thyroid nodule. And thankfully it came back as just a really large follicular nodule. But I started talking to this head and neck surgeon, and I was telling him a little bit about myself. Yeah, I had prediabetes and this and this. And he said, oh, he's like, yeah, that's it. And he's like, the insulin resistance, that's why you have this nodule. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, I see it all the time. Kind of, middle-aged, overweight women, they get sent in for these goiters and thyroid nodules. And he's like, it's totally related to the insulin resistance. I'm like, nobody ever taught me that. But I just like inadvertently found this thing by somebody scanning it. But
good on him for knowing that.
I think, but I think what happens when somebody tells you you have hypothyroidism, this internal language I was talking about, this identity I was talking about, I see so many women and they're like, oh yeah, I have Hashimoto's, or I have thyroid function, and that's why I'm overweight. That's why I'm tired. That's why, like, it becomes their identity. Like, and I can tell you right now that when you start prioritizing taking care of yourself, you start sleeping better, you start lifting weights, you start fixing your diet, your body just starts fixing all of these things. I mean, I had acne, I had rosacea at one point that's never come back. I mean, it's like, but when we just focus on those things, we're missing the big picture. Like, there's so many things in medicine that can be taken care of when you just start taking care of your cells and your systems. Yeah. They start to fix themselves. And thankfully for me, my thyroid did that.
Have you ever done the math? How many medications do you think you'd be on if you didn't fix your lifestyle with diet and exercise by now?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd for sure still be on thyroid medicine. And then, when it comes to insulin resistance, I always remind people that it's this spectrum, right? We've got just insulin resistance, and then we have prediabetes, and then we have diabetes. And it's a spectrum in which you can move up and you can move down. And we are taught in medical school how to identify diabetics. And there are thresholds for prediabetes. What we really should be finding is all of those people that are on the 5-year journey. Yeah. And I got caught when I was pre-diabetic, but through all my pregnancies, there was red flags left and right. I was failing my glucose testing. I mean, I had a 1-hour glucose test in my second pregnancy that was over 200. Like, that should have been a huge red flag saying like, whoa, like the fire is burning, like call the fire department. And so what people need to understand is that, and not just insulin resistance, breast cancer, it starts 10 years before you're diagnosed with breast cancer. Like, all of these things are just slow, subtle changes until like, boom, you have a diagnosis. But there was years of decisions and impact that were happening prior to that. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it. I was on metformin at one point. So thankfully the most medications I've ever been on was metformin and thyroid medicine. But yeah, I mean, by the time I would turn 40s, 50s, 60s, like, the med list would have just kept growing. Like it would have. I
Right.
would
Well,
have
because then
eventually
you start
probably been
treating
on
the
a blood
side
pressure
effects.
med, probably been on another diabetes med. Yeah.
Totally.
Some acid reflux. I mean, like all of these things.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk about protein. Why do people as we age need more protein?
So women in particular are just bad at eating protein. You know, like eating a big steak, just like men love that, right? Like women tend to, you know, eat more chicken, not as much red meat, maybe some fish. But protein is so important because our body turns over all of our protein every single year. Like, you know, in a day, like there's like 300 grams of protein that are turned over. And so we need to continually be giving it those amino acids, those building blocks. I talk about in my book, it's like Lego blocks. Like you can't build the Lego castle from the box that they give you if you're missing Lego parts. The second part is lean body mass. We've talked about the importance of muscle, and we need protein in the diet to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And in a general sense, it takes a certain amount of leucine and a certain amount of total amino acids to stimulate that, which equates to about 30 grams of protein. And as we age, we develop something called anabolic resistance, which means that it takes more protein to stimulate that signal to the muscle for muscle protein synthesis. So we need to be doing resistance training and we need to be eating adequate protein. What most people are doing, women in particular, are constantly eating sub-threshold amounts of protein. So we're grabbing a protein bar, it's only 20 grams. You know, we're eating a salad with like, you know, a sprinkle of chicken on it. It's got 10 or 15 or 20 grams. We're doing this throughout the day and we're never hitting that 30 gram threshold. And so we're not stimulating muscle protein synthesis. And then year by year by year, we're losing that signal and we're losing muscle. Plus hormonally, as we get into perimenopause and menopause, we start losing estrogen, we start losing testosterone and these things that are also impacting our lean body mass. So as we age, we need more dietary protein. And if you're not used to eating it, I'll tell you right now, when you eat adequate amount of protein, the satiation is incredible. When I start working with patients, they're like, Doc, I can't eat this much food. And I'm like, oh, you can. Welcome to like normal satiety. Like that full feeling, like they are not used to experiencing that true fullness that comes with eating adequate amounts of protein and fat. And so they're like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm like, oh no, you can. But it's important when you're talking about muscle protein synthesis, breaking it up over multiple meals per day. This is kind of where the traditional bodybuilder diet came from, like eating 6-8 meals per day, was breaking it up into these windows where you're constantly stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Well, I'll tell you, you don't have to eat 6 to 8 meals per day, but for most women listening, eating 30 grams of protein 3 times a day, which is like the basics in my Hard to Kill challenge. Like if you can just eat 30 grams 3 times a day, you're doing pretty damn good because our protein requirements are all centered around how much lean body mass we have. And so many women are under muscled that if you can get 90 grams, like you're doing pretty dang good. But you could even eat up to about 1.4 gram per pound of lean body mass. Now, most women listening have no clue how much muscle they have, but they know what their weight is on the scale. And it's a good estimate, but there could be a woman listening that's over 200 pounds. And so telling people to eat 200 grams of protein is like, it's hard. It's very hard. So for most people listening, if you can get at least 30 grams of protein 3 times a day, you're probably going to be doing a decent job at protecting your lean body mass. You're going to get some satiety and you're going to be much better off metabolically in the long run.
I love it. I'm thinking like talking about red meat. You know, I have a podcast about sex, which is like a massive taboo subject. And like, I'm like, I think that red meat might be more taboo than sex. Like it is just, it's like the myth of being bulky, right? Like this myth that won't die, but like the opinion, and I don't know if it's like our pure, saying very controversial things right now, but it's like the purity culture of veganism and vegetarianism, right? And I'm like, isn't that kind of a form of purity culture? And people bring like morality into it, but like protein for protein and vitamins, like red meat is okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Take it away.
It's very much political. The attack on red meat is very political. You know, the idea of eating something with a face is emotionally provoking for some people. But the real facts of the matter is we are part of the mammalian species and we are meat eaters. Our bodies were not designed to be completely herbivore creatures. I think we're omnivores. I don't think we're all necessarily carnivores. That's a whole nother political debate. But the attack on red meat is completely political. And when it comes to what types of protein should you eat, right? Let's just compare beef and chicken. First of all, animals compared to plants, animal protein sources are more bioavailable to our bodies. And it also takes less of them to stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. So you'd have to eat massive amounts of plants and carbohydrates to get the amount of protein that you really need. So it's not an efficient way. I'm not saying somebody can't be vegan or vegetarian with massive supplementation and achieve that, but it would be a lot harder. So eating animal proteins, why red meat over chicken? The amino acid profile is different. And so when you're just eating chicken, it changes the amount of methionine and other amino acids that are available in these proteins. And red meat has more nutrients. So it has fat in it. And that's where a lot of controversy comes, is saturated fat. People don't think you should eat red meat because of its saturated fat content. But a little lesser known fact is that the amount of monounsaturated fat in red meat is about equivalent to the amount of saturated fat in it. And so these are healthy fats, and the American Cardiology Association just came out a couple years ago and said saturated fat in meat is not causing heart disease when it comes from whole food sources, right? Most of the fats that are driving inflammation and cardiovascular disease are oxidized polyunsaturated fats like vegetable oils, canola oils, or trans fats. So these chemically created fats that we've created in a lab, essentially. And so people should not be afraid of red meat. It is a great protein source in the diet. It also contains a lot of other vitamins and minerals that are necessary. Not saying you can't eat chicken and fish and other things like that, but red meat is very healthy. And when you look over the course of the last 30 years, they're doing a good job of scaring people away from it. We're actually eating less red meat now than we were in the 1980s, yet we still have increasing amounts of cancer and heart disease and all these things we're supposed to be battling. So people are eating less red meat, and it's not really helping. So red meat is a perfectly healthy food that is an easy protein source. I eat a ton of ground beef because it is so easy. It's very easy for me to cook up a couple pounds on Sunday and just have, little Pyrex bowls of it and throw some veggies or pickles or olives or, whatever. It's a very easy protein source. And I'm a fan of it. So don't be afraid of red meat. And there's no quality studies that show that it causes heart disease or that it causes colon cancer, which are the two things that people mostly bring up.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's like the same myth of lifting weights is going to get you bulky. Is man, it just won't die. And I tell everybody experiment, try it out. We're not telling you how to eat, but this protein thing, especially as we age, especially in the perimenopause, menopause world, and wanting to live our best lives and to be healthy and vibrant and strong. It's play around with it. I did the whole trendy vegetarian thing for a while, and I think I was just undernourished. I was busy. I didn't I clearly wasn't doing it properly. And to me, eating meat's it's easier.
Yeah. The other thing that meat contains, which I have been starting to share a little bit more on my social media, is creatine. So when you look at the supplement industry, one of the most widely studied, we're talking thousands upon thousands of studies for body composition, for muscle building, is creatine. Everybody for a while probably thought it was an anabolic steroid, but it's one of the most widely used substances. Well, where do you find creatine? You find it in animal proteins. So fish, beef, great sources of creatine. But when you look at the amount of creatine necessary for our brain health and for muscle health, you'd have to be eating pounds upon pounds of meat. So it's a supplement that I actually really love for people that are prioritizing muscle building and brain health. So it is very good for our brains. Our body can make a small amount of creatine in the kidneys and the liver, but most of it comes from dietary sources, and that is animal protein. So people who are pushing kind of this plant-based agenda, it really worries me because for women of reproductive age, right, animal foods have choline, they have vitamin D, they have B12, they have all these things that are super important for our fertility and metabolic health, and they're found only in animal foods. And so if you have a very plant-forward diet, you really have to be cognizant of these things, that it could require massive supplementation, which, like I said, is not optimal. If you have some moral, ethical reason, great, but it's just not optimal.
Yeah. Add to that your thought about collagen supplements. And there's somebody poo-pooed the collagen supplements because they're like, it just breaks down in your stomach. And I'm like, well, your stomach breaks everything down, including like other proteins that you eat. Like collagen supplements, worth it? Good, especially for like aging skin and joints and bones.
Yeah. So collagen, once again, comes from animal products. So, fish, beef, great sources of collagen, bone broth. I do take a collagen supplement. There are studies that look at, the biggest caveat, just what you're saying, right? Collagen goes down, it gets broken down in the stomach, it gets absorbed. Is it really getting incorporated into, our tissues essentially? Well, collagen, it's amino acids. It's amino acids. And there are studies that show like wrinkles, collagen in the face, especially when taken with like vitamin C and hyaluronic acid, can really help aesthetically our skin and our collagen production. But another one that I have really started to hone in on for my perimenopausal and menopausal patients is collagen for bone health. So our bones they're not just a hard calcified, they're not just like as hard as this table, it's living tissue. And it is primarily the main protein in bones is collagen. And the collagen protein essentially creates this matrix that then we have the calcium deposits that come in and harden that matrix. But the main matrix and component of the protein in the bone is collagen. So I'm a huge fan of collagen. I don't think there's any downsides to it of taking it. Of course, you can get it in the diet, but it's an easy thing to supplement. And for your skin, for your bones, for your joints, for your hair, lots of reasons why women would want to take collagen. And it doesn't have to be fancy. I'm not a huge fan of supplementation in general, but I think collagen, creatine would be ones that I think would be high yield for some people listening.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I'm actually a big poo-poo of supplements, but I'm like, I think there's something to magnesium. There's probably something to some vitamin D, and then the collagen and creatine. Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about, we can't talk about being healthy without talking about alcohol. Why does alcohol make you easy to kill?
Okay, full disclosure. I started drinking in college, just like probably everybody else did, and it was a very social thing for me. As an adult and a mom of 3 kids and a professional, I don't drink like a ton, but it was very social, have a glass of wine with dinner, go out on the weekends with friends, go tailgating, whatever it was. So over this last year, I started to, I wrote this book called Hard to Kill and I started to think about, alcohol in my life and like, why do I drink? And I think most of us drink because we like it to lower our inhibitions. We feel like it's a form of stress relief.
Mm-hmm. We like the buzz.
Get some serotonin from it because it's a social thing. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't have the resilience of like drinking like a college kid anymore. Like I can't handle a hangover, and I hated the way that I would wake up the next day, even only with like 1 or 2 drinks, and just kind of that brain fog, that taste in your mouth. Like you just don't feel 100%. So I started to kind of like think about this idea of like, I don't know, what would my life be like without drinking? And of course I went through 3 pregnancies. I did this bodybuilding competition this last year. So I was sober for like 5 months while I was doing that. And I was like, I don't know, what would life be like if I didn't drink? Then I really started to look at the literature on alcohol and like how bad it is for us. Like,
yeah. Once you start you're like, how does anybody drink? It causes 10
as a doctor,
cancers.
we like screen people and we're like, yeah, okay, 1 to 2 drinks in moderation. So I kept telling myself this story, this language in my head, like, yeah, I'm drinking in moderation. Like it's no big deal. It shrinks your brain. It increases the risk of like a bunch of types of cancer.
Horrible for sleep.
It's
anybody who has depression or anxiety should not put alcohol in their body. It's horrible for depression.
It's horrible for your
anxiety.
sex life.
It's horrible for your sex life.
So yeah. I just started thinking like, okay,
it's real bad.
Yeah.
I think that like the average health podcast, and this being a podcast about sex, but it's like, this is about living your best life and your best sex life. And it's like, women need to hear it, especially from doctors. Or like,
Yeah.
I don't think this has a legitimate role in health.
I completely agree with you. And I would go to like these metabolic conferences and we'd have these dinners and soirees and like an open bar. And I have said repeatedly, like, as I want to be like the billboard for people, like walk the walk, talk the talk, you know. And so I thought, you know, what would my life be like if I just didn't drink anymore? And so I kept thinking, okay, I'll do it for a month, or I'll do it for, oh, but then Christmas is coming. Oh, but then the
brain's
summertime
tricky,
is coming.
man. The brain wants it. The brain wants it.
I said, you know what?
Dopamine.
I said, fine, I'm not going to drink for 365 days, because that was going to force me to experience every day of the year, the birthdays, the holidays, the summers, the, like whatever it is. And I'm just going to do it for 365 days and decide if I feel like it adds value to my health and to my life. I think it would also give me an opportunity to get into uncomfortable situations. Like, how do you encounter social situations where everyone else is drinking and you're not?
Yeah.
And so October 1st, I went sober, and the experience has been really awesome. And I'm not sure if I'm ever going to drink again. Because if it makes me 1% less than like what I want to be, I just don't think it's worth it. And I've now started to, I have this drink right here. And this is not an advertisement by any means, but I have this like little drink. It's called Koyos, but it's got lion's mane and B12 and choline and all these like nootropics. And so what I've done is I said, okay, like, why did I use alcohol? Because I wanted the relaxing effect, the, you know, whatever. And so now I've kind of experimented with other healthier versions of these things. And like, I just don't ever think I need it again. And it literally shrinks your brain, increases your risk of cancer.
Right.
And makes you sleep like crappy and ruins your sex life and causes a lot of other legal problems for people. I mean, let's face the facts. Like, before Uber was invented, drunk driving was like very prevalent.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm a professional and I'm a mom, and like, I would never want to put myself in that situation. So I don't know, my life is better without alcohol. And I was very, what I guess you would call sober curious for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But I was like, oh my God, I could never do that, because it's so pervasive in our society. It's like everywhere people are drinking. And
then you see how it's marketed to
myself
moms
so
and how
many
it's
times.
marketed.
Oh, 100%. I will never forget, Kelly. I went to, I don't know, this like comedy show, like Moms Behaving Badly, or I don't even remember what it was called, but it was these two women. And I was like postpartum, I think after my second child. And I went with some girlfriends, and we went and we got our drinks and we had our, you know, cute outfits on. And I'm listening to these women, and the whole bit of their like comedy show was like, oh yeah, like we're tired and like whatever, our kids are assholes and like we're just gonna drink wine and like we hate our bodies, but it's okay, like we're I had never left a place like so disempowered. And that was like, I seriously like replay that show in my head. I was like, what are we doing to ourselves? Like, they're not happy. Like they're clearly not happy. It was like reinforcing like all this like unhappiness, like it was you're being sold a story of like,
people are making so much money off of people drinking. Like, you know, that's the other thing of like, you don't realize these industries put up sports stadiums. They have so much money.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And
you're making
the
lots
government
of people
is
wealthy.
too. I went and toured the Jack Daniels factory because I had a cousin get married in Mississippi this year. And it was very interesting actually to like hear the history of it. I didn't realize that 70 cents of every dollar of alcohol sold in this country actually goes to the government. So the government's making a ton of money off alcohol sales either. So like, they're not going to
keep drinking.
Force these industries to cut down on the sales.
No. Well, isn't it interesting that doctors are told moderation? Like, we are never told to tell patients to not drink. Where are the guidelines for like mental health?
2 drinks
and
a
not
day
drinking?
for men, 1 for women.
Yeah. Moderation.
We'd never tell them to have 1 cigarette per day.
Yeah. And exactly. And the other thing about medicine and alcohol that I like, cause I'm like so stoked about your story and congratulations. And like, I'm a year and a half now since cause I was doing 6 months, And I did 6 months. And at 6 months, I was exactly where you are. I'm like, I don't see the upside of bringing this back. Life is better now. And I was just like wine on Fridays with dinner, like just to kind of numb. And then I was like, I don't have any time to lose, man. I can't be down 2 hours. Like, I love my life. I want to experience all of it in the present moment and all of my feelings. And I don't want to numb any of my life ever again. And the other thing for me was like, I can't sit here and tell women that estrogen is safe and they're so freaked out about breast cancer and then not be like, you guys should stop drinking then because drinking causes breast cancer.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
So that's like my history. But then you're like, why aren't like the way doctors are taught about alcohol is very interesting because you only need to quit if you have a problem.
Right.
And it's really this pathological, like, well, quit. If you quit, you must have had a problem. And it's that way of thinking about it instead of like, what does it actually add to your life? Oh, and besides the fact it costs a lot of money, like you're emptying your wallet. But like doctors, it's like you either drink or you have a problem with drinking. And like the whole, like maybe to be your healthiest self, you just don't use alcohol for all these different reasons. It's not even part of the conversation, which is mind blowing to me.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
It's crazy. As we wrap up, can I read out loud the Hard to Kill manifesto on the last page?
Yeah.
Has anybody done that with you on a podcast yet?
No, this is the first one.
I'm like, oh, it's so good. Okay, you guys, the last page before the conclusion on the Hard to Kill book is your Hard to Kill manifesto. I'm on this earth for a purpose. Every day that I wake up is a great day. I will embrace discomfort. Where I spend my time and energy defines my existence. I will respect my body. I have no excuses. I create my own happiness. I want my life and no one else's. I value my health. I will routinely audit my circle. I am responsible for my actions, not outcomes. My life will inspire others. I will honor my word. I will be resilient. I am hard to kill. So fucking
It's about that language. It's about that language. I'm just telling you, you guys can write your own little manifesto, like whatever it is, like who you are, who you truly are, who you truly want to be. If you figure out a way to incorporate that on a daily basis, it seems so silly. Stand in front of the mirror, read it to yourself, read it to your friends, write it down, put it everywhere, put it on your vision board. But like, it's just about that internal language. And this is how I live my life now.
It's absolutely beautiful. What's 2023 going to bring you? What's on the docket?
Oh gosh. So, I have made my kids a priority this year because they're just at a point in their life where they're so busy and they will, it's just crazy. Like my oldest daughter, I know they grow up so fast and I love being a mother. They're just like my pride and joy. I'm continuing to build Hard to Kill Academy and that has just been so awesome. We finally released on Audible. I know you were joking when you recorded yours. It was like the Voice Olympics. And I finally got it recorded. And then Audible was like, oh, we need like the cover photo to be different. And like, we need you to say the end. And like, so I'm so glad that is finally out. But I'll be speaking at a few conferences. I'm speaking in Low Carb Denver at the end of February. And then a few other conferences in the springtime. I will be doing a Hard to Kill weekend, retreat and conference kind of, I don't want to call it a conference. It will be very immersive. I mean, we're talking like ice baths, like coming up with this internal language thing. I'm going to have some guest instructors. It's going to be awesome. I haven't released that yet, but that's taking a lot of my energy for 2023. And then we do have a summit, Hard to Kill Summit here in Omaha, July 28th and 29th. And so that has been amazing too. We've really rebranded. It used to be very like low carb ketogenic, but I think that the Hard to Kill thing, it's like, it's so self-explanatory. It's like,
yeah, it gets people to pay attention to.
I'm bringing all these people. They're going to teach you all this shit about like how to, not how to not die, but just like how to be harder to kill. I mean, it's just, like we don't know how much, like this sounds awful. You guys, I could literally get off this podcast and walk out the door and get in my car and get in a car accident and die tonight. Like that is just the reality that we live in. And as doctors, like we play in the life and death space, but I think we get so like immune to that and like immune to our own mortality. And it's just like 2023 for me, I'm so grateful for every single day and every opportunity I've been given. Like this could be my last year. Like that's just it. And I'm just going to live my true authentic self and just enjoy it with all the people in it.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks for coming back on. I really love talking to you today.
Thanks, Kelly.